marketing of English as a second language programs in Canada. As far as I know, I think I'm the first Canadian to ever look at that as a research question. Other people have examined it in the UK and Australia. And as I was doing my research, a couple of things happened. One was that I found out that educators hate to talk about marketing. And there's a little bit of, well, there's not a little bit, there's a lot of philosophical tension between the educational world, the social sectors, and the business sector. Jody alluded to a panel discussion that you had and said that that sentiment came out, that they're kind of like oil and water. That sentiment echoes what I found in my doctoral research as well. In fact, I wanted to interview directors of ESL programs in Canada, and except for people that I had personal connections with, every other person turned me down flat. And one of the things that I found was that teachers and educators, when it comes to sharing resources about teaching and learning, they'll take the shirt off their back and give it to you. You need an activity for this? Sure, I've got something, I can help you with that. You need help with marketing? It doesn't really work. Suddenly, it becomes very territorial. We can't share our marketing ideas with you because you might take away our students. We don't have enough funding as it is. We don't have enough students as it is. And I found this very interesting because it's the same teachers who were very happy to share resources about teaching became very reluctant to talk about marketing or share resources and ideas about marketing when they got into an administrator's position. The other thing that I did was I had to look at my own perceptions around marketing, and we'll get there in a minute. This is going to be an interactive session, so I'll encourage you to take notes. We're going to use this little workbook and walk our way through it in the next hour, or walk our way through most of it anyway, so that you can leave with some very practical tips. So go ahead and take out your workbook. We'll start on page 2 with the process that we're going to go through the next little while. I want to talk a little bit about developing a marketing mindset and what that means for people who work in education. I'll give you some ideas for polishing your program, give you some ideas on how to generate positive awareness and interest in the community, how to spend limited marketing dollars wisely, and finally what's hot and what's not in nonprofit marketing. Developing a marketing mindset is something that I've done over the past almost 10 years now, because I come to literacy through second language learning. So I'm a Spanish teacher by training. I taught Spanish for 16 years, and I've also taught ESL. And then I did some applied research work at Bow Valley College in literacy, and that took me into the literacy field. The marketing part came from being in charge of an ESL program and having to market it internationally with no training, background, or experience in how to do it. And that eventually became the focus of my career. How do people market language programs? And I knew that I wanted to do it, but I didn't know why. It was a mandate of the program I was working in that we should generate revenue. How many people here have to generate revenue with their programs? Okay, so it's a growing number. Super. Okay. I didn't know how to do it. And there were philosophical tensions in our program around, should we have to make money? I grappled with that. And eventually I thought, okay, why do I want to promote languages? Why do I want to market this? And then I eventually went and learned that there are promotion was just one of the 4 P's of marketing, right? You know, the 4 P's, the product, which for us is our classes or our services. That's number 1, the product or the classes or services. The place in the marketplace, so your channels of distribution, which for a retail product would be your salespeople. For those of us who work in education, it would include, if you use any agents or you work with anybody else to promote your program, the promotion of it, and then the pricing of your programs. Those are the 4 P's of marketing. So I always thought that it was all about the promotion, and then I learned that there were these other things as well. Anyway, I had to figure out for myself, why did I feel so passionately about this, especially when people around me felt so passionately in a different direction? And it didn't come to me until after I was done my PhD, I had started on this other piece of research, and I started looking at the connection between leadership and languages, and started a project on world leaders who spoke more than one language. And then it dawned on me. For me, one of the values that I hold is that when people improve their language skills, they improve their leadership skills. I started examining world leaders who had, for example, learned English as a second language. Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. I learned that Gandhi spoke 11 languages and used those to advance his humanitarian and political work. And so this became one of my core values, and I finally understood why it was important to me to keep marketing languages. Because when we learn languages, when we increase our capacities as human beings, we increase our capacities to lead. And as we change, so we can change the world. Gandhi said, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. And so that became, finally, after having written a book on marketing of language programs and doing a PhD in it, okay, this is it. I finally understand, but it took me 8 years to get there. I'm counting on you being a whole lot smarter than me, because I'm going to ask you to figure out what your values and your marketing mindset are. Okay? Has anybody ever heard of the work by Jim Collins? Okay, one person. He wrote a book called Good to Great, and it looked at organizations that are great over a long period of time. What does it mean for an organization to be great? And it was a great business read. Love to read business books. And he talked about indicators of success for business, and that would be consistent profit over time. This is a key indicator for business. And I thought, that's fantastic. Why doesn't he write a book about education in the nonprofit sector? Turns out he did. It's not a book yet. It's a small little monograph. It's like 35 or 36 pages. This is a fantastic read if you're feeling any tension around why we are incorporating business practices into nonprofit work or community work, and he actually says that business can learn from nonprofit. The author's name is Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote the main book, which you can find in hardcover and in softcover, is Good to Great. After Good to Great, he wrote what for me changed one of my perceptions around marketing, was Good to Great for the social sectors. Good to Great for the social sectors. You can't buy it in bookstores because it's not a huge seller. You can buy it online through Amazon.ca. That's where I bought it. 36 pages, $14.95. Super book, because he talks about indicators of success in the nonprofit and community world and how it will never be profit for us. And that's okay. And he sort of outlines some ways that we can think about indicators of success for the nonprofit and community and education sectors, and how we can reframe what we do without having to think about, well, in business they would think about profit, but that doesn't matter to us, so what does matter? So I told you about one of my sources of inspiration for my work. For me, it became Gandhi, and he's become a driving force behind a lot of the research that I do and practice in my own classroom practice. I'm still an active teacher, and much of my professional work. So I'd like you to think for a minute about your sources of inspiration that drive your values, your professional values. And if you can articulate your values briefly, just jot down 3 values that guide your own work. I'll give you a minute to do that. I'm not sure if anybody wrote this down, but I'll just ask the question. Who here believes that they shouldn't have to market their programs? Wow, that's great. Anybody here believe that the government should give us more money so that we can do our programs better? Less work. I have news for you. It's probably not going to happen. My take on it is, and has always been for education, that government cutbacks started in the 1980s. They've started across the developed world in the 1980s, and they've continued ever since. There are no indicators that we will get back the funding that we had in the 1970s and early 1980s. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's good news. And the good news is that the skills and capacities of people in leadership and administration positions in education are increasing. So we're building our skills, because many people in administration and leadership positions in education and nonprofit don't get there because they have a background in management. They get there because they're fantastic teachers. Anybody here a fantastic teacher who got promoted into management, leadership, administration? Really? You're not lousy teachers. Come on, you're good teachers. I know you are. Question for you is, we have to market our programs. Because if we don't market our programs, who do we think will do it for us? There is no one. It's up to us. Our sustainability is our responsibility. You can write that down and take it back to the office if you like. Our sustainability is our responsibility. It's up to us not only to create programs that can survive, but that can thrive. Because thriving is better than surviving. That works for our learners, and it works for our programs. Thriving is better than surviving. When you can market your program effectively and powerfully, you go from surviving to thriving. Developing a marketing mindset and being willing and open to market and promote your programs because you know what values drive you, and you're confident in the fact that you don't have to make money in order to be a successful program. That paradigm doesn't work in literacy, it doesn't work in community work, and it doesn't work in education, and that's okay. We have other indicators of success, our learners' stories, the number of registrants, if you want to quantify it. There are all kinds of different ways that we can quantify our success in community-based education, in formal education, non-formal and informal education, that have nothing to do with the bottom line. Let's flip over to page 5, and I'll give you some ideas for polishing your program image. The approach that I've taken to marketing has always been very practical. It's been very hands-on. It's been very grassroots and in-house, do-it-yourself. Why? Because that's the kind of program that I worked in. And I did it when we had no money. And we worked from the ground up. All of these ideas, I wrote a book called 101 Ways to Market Your Language Program. It's all things that people can do for themselves, because most organizations that I found in education don't have the financial capacity to hire outside marketing firms. All of these ideas come from what will soon be the 3rd edition of 101 Ways to Market Your Language Program. But the very first one came from the 1st edition. How many people here have business cards? Okay, super. Yeah, yes. Sure do. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. That's changed. I'm so glad that so many of you have business cards. When I started working in marketing for languages and education, lots of people didn't. We would go to a conference and you would have no business cards. People would literally be writing down their name and phone number on a napkin. And I thought, this is terrible, because people who work in educational programs, when you want the community members to know about it, when you want potential learners to know about it, potential funders to know about it, a business card is de rigueur, as they say in some contexts. You have to have a business card. They're cheap today.